Enough is enough. I have had it with these bloody snakes on these bloody lizards.
Bastillodons are so cute in their own weird way. Today I'm up against Spudhouse, one of my patrons. We're going to be talking about the Ark of Sotek here. I just want to put this up front that this is from one of my patron practice sessions, and the builds are somewhat experimental. You know, it's more about getting reps and sort of learning, kind of tinkering with different things. Yeah, so not meta builds by any means, but I've got a few replays from this session that were very, very good battles I'm going to be showing you today. We're taking a look at Lizardmen versus Vampire Counts. My own build here, I've got the two Arks of Sotek. They're pretty good at dealing with blobs of chaff in a long game. We've got a couple of Sacred Boxgores for some magic damage. Slan of High Magic also has some magic damage. I've got Apotheosis, Tempest. Definitely regret not bringing like either Soul Quench or Hand of Glory, because there's no flying units here, so all I've got is Apotheosis with that Greater Arcane Conduit. But yeah, a couple of Saurus Scarvets, 5 Saurus Spears, including the ROR, which may be arguably a mistake as well, considering their ROR ability is missile resistance. But for Spudhouse's Vampire Counts here, got some Skeleton Warriors, zombies up front, a Strigoi on foot, which is actually a pretty interesting choice. I haven't really tried this too much since the infantry mass change, but it seems like he's going to be pretty decent. Necromancer on Unholy Lodestone, and plenty of cavalry already swept up and around the flanks here. We've got some Blood Knights, 2 Blood Knights, 3 Blood Knights, plus Regiment of Renowned Black Knights, Varix Reavers. So we're going to get the Arks of Sotek into battle here. Arks of Sotek, obviously, Bastillodons are pretty decent monsters. They don't have the best weapon strength or charge, especially in comparison to something like Stegodon, but they do have a lot of special abilities. Obviously, Solar Engine's quite good in this kind of blob attrition fight where you're basically guaranteed to be fighting a melee blobs of chaff. This snake summon here, the Sneck Drop, can do a lot of damage to those blobs of low-tier stuff, and since they won't take hardly any damage at all in return from said low-tier stuff like zombies and skeletons, they can just sit there all day and grind down that chaff. Meanwhile, we're protecting the center here from the Blood Knights. I've got my Saurus Scarvets, some spears here kind of formed up into not quite a box, but excuse me, spring allergies kind of killing me lately. Cohort of Waddle. Yeah, the Regiment of Renown also kind of holding. The Armor Sundering definitely helps the Saurus punch a little bit harder here. Banishment going off on the side. Yeah, so far, Necromancer is another Corpse Cart staying in position. You can see here, though, that we were able to take down that Corpse Cart, crumble away a few more zombies here. Not that much value, but just, you know, getting rid of those numbers, very important. Will definitely grind you down over time. Notice, though, that there's been this Crypt Horror summon, which I didn't really talk too much about. Crypt Ghoul summon, it looks like, here as well. And Crypt Ghouls will do pretty well against Saurus. Saurus don't have that much armor, so they can actually come in here and get some pretty good DPS. The Crypt Horror summon, Horror summon, I should say, might get demonetized. It's okay. The Winds of Magic usage, though, I feel it's not very efficient. Generally, you want to be doing other things. It can be nice to block in certain units with mass, certainly, but I don't know. Just the Winds of Magic kind of price you pay, not being able to do more invocations into Heck or zombie summons, I feel, is a little bit of an issue, but we'll see how that turns out in the late game. This Bastillodon about to get isolated over here. Some of the Saurus are starting to give out. So definitely in for a rough time in the center here as well. Kind of just grinding. Unfortunately, my Sacred Croc scores are getting slowly cycle charged to death by these Knights. Spudhouse doing a great job flowing in and out and not staying in combat. You can see he's constantly cycling in and out here. Like these guys, they charge in, they stay in combat for 10 to 20 seconds. Pull back out, rinse and repeat, and that's definitely the way you got to do things. But these Blood Knights are starting to lose some models, and without Invocation of the Heck, they won't recover those. The Unholy Lodestone will heal them, but it does not recover models, so something to be aware of. Oh yeah, I love the Croc Score models. I know certain people are not fans of the Croc Score models we have in Total War Warhammer, but I definitely am a huge fan. I think they look very distinctive from the Saurus. They're not just like, you know, big Saurus or something. Like Croc dudes. I like it. And it's looking grim, though, in the center here. You can see these other Saurus Spears won the battle down here, came up. We've got this Ark of Sotek also still grinding here. This other one, you know, it's taken some damage from the Blood Knights, but one benefit of Bastillodon's 140 armor is really good. I mean, Blood Knights have decent AP, but the majority of that non-AP damage is going to be consistently blocked. So that's, you know, they'll do some damage, especially on the charge, but Bastillodons can tank relatively well. That's another benefit of them. And in a situation like this where their DPS output isn't great, but in a blob, those snake drops can do a lot of damage. We're going to throw a banishment down here that's just going to wreck this one healthy unit of Saurus I have, so a little bit of friendly fire there. I guess we've got this other unit that's doing okay over here, but it does flow back over and get into these Blood Knights, so that's okay. I am losing the Sacred Croc scores after sustaining them with Cold-Blooded for quite a decent amount of time. We'll hopefully get them back. But Bastillodon's also here again, just tanking, waiting on those snacks to go, and there it is. The animation's really cool, I have to say. It would be nice to have gotten swarm units, and, you know, have it be like actual summon for a swarm unit. Maybe someday if they ever do a swarm DLC, then maybe we'll get the snake swarms and that'll turn into an actual summon. But for the time being, I actually really like this effect. And, yeah, it doesn't do a ton of damage. It's a little bit. It's enough that it matters, you know, in a grindy game like this. The thing about vampire counts is just the passive healing sources means that all the damage you can do, like, matters, right? You really want to maximize, especially, like, Lizardmen, who don't have the best kind of attack units. They have a harder time clearing through chaff. Like, being able to grind them down with the Ark of Sotek is pretty decent. Still a little bit of a meme unit. Not something you see all the time, but this is definitely the matchup, I would say, where I see it shining the most. Not quite a Mortis engine, but kind of like a Mortis engine. You know, a temporary Mortis engine that also does poison damage. I'd have to actually look at the damage scaling and see how good it is. But the Strigoi's just been tanking like a boss as well. Really haven't been able to do much with him. I have at times been focusing him with one or both of the Scarvets, but honestly not able to do it too much just because the Scarvets, you know, mass, they get blocked up by zombies and other chaff units, and dealing with the Knights more as a present threat, trying to see them away. And they have been on the move the whole time, probably generated a ton of value. But we'll see. The Necromancer's approaching his healing cap. We've gotten rid of most of the support units. Still behind on the balance of power, though, as the Salon's getting pretty close to dead. Both of the Arks of Sotek are as well. Got a handful of spears left, but tide is starting to turn, especially as the Strigoi gets actually fully surrounded here. Single entities start to pound on him. And certainly a formidable combatant has managed to survive this entire time up until this point, but I don't know, he might do okay here. We'll see. Blood Knights do charge back in. There's maybe enough magic for one more zombie summon. That would be very helpful here. But we'll see. Strigoi currently still holding. He does have that Opal Amulet giving him a bit of damage resistance to help to survive this. Saurus actually do rout here, so, I mean, balance of power is still basically even. There are quite healthy Blood Knights. But I've got this next summon, and there's no maxed uses on that, of course. So once again, going to deploy that. Kind of forces the Blood Knights away. Once my Scarvets can get a decent engagement on him. And really that's what we need here to take out a formidable combatant like this Strigoi. To get my single entities in a surround and hit him from multiple angles. Really the best bet for me to finish him off here. Doesn't have a whole lot of armor either, so the Saurus that are kind of like helping with their chip damage are actually doing pretty significant amounts of chip damage. It does count as infantry, so they don't get that anti-large bonus, but still, they're getting any hits at all. Forbidden Rod here for the Necromancer to just try and squeeze out one more zombie summon. Probably is actually going to finish him off, though, yeah, or the Bastillodon did. Way to go, Ark of Sotek. Very nice. And a good game to Spudhouse. Really a fun one. Like I said, experimental builds. The Strigoi actually pretty formidable combatant, even just as taking him as like an infantry fighter lord, like a cheap infantry fighter lord. Might not be a bad idea, and just stick to casting spells on the Necromancer. Definitely something to be looked at. But yeah, in the end, the Arks of Sotek both, I guess one of them didn't pay for itself, one of them did. If you kind of average out their value, I guess they do both. But yeah, I mean, pretty decent stuff. It's another kind of tanky single entity, can help stem the tide against a lot of high mass stuff like these cavalry. And then, yeah, I mean, just grinding down the zombies and skeletons just that little bit faster and making sure that you can get rid of them while taking minimal losses makes Arcs of Sotek pretty good in this matchup. The Sacred Croc Swords also did decently, fairly well. Didn't quite pay for themselves, but relatively good, and definitely helped the Saurus all punch very well. I think this is one of the best, like this and Bretonia, I would say, are the best matchups for Saurus Spears. They're pretty decent now. They're better than they used to be, but yeah, definitely got some very solid value here. Saurus Scarvets as well. They're kind of like single entity Temple Guard almost, for a little bit cheaper. Pretty nice. And the Hyslon as well. I wasn't highlighting it too much, but he's got a few abilities, including that Blood Statuette of Spite, and, Banishment and everything, as well as fighting in melee. 96 kills, 2300 damage value. Pretty impressive stuff. The Strigoi, actually, considering he's just a foot character with kind of a somewhat minimal loadout, I have to look at the exact cost, but that's pretty decent. Obviously, all the chaff just kind of gets wrecked here. The Graveguard even, too. I'm not sure exactly. Probably just got stepped on by the Bastildons in the late game. But Cav obviously all gets quite a bit of value. In this kind of hammer and anvil style, you would expect the value to be wrapped up in this Cav, and it largely is. So, yeah, pretty fun stuff. In terms of monster selections, like, again, most matchups, this Arc of Sotek, the lowish speed of Bastildons, and the kind of lowish single target offensive output means they're not great for fighting other monsters. They're okay as kind of that extra single entity, right? Like as we saw there in some situations. Yeah, 1,000 points to pay is a pretty decent amount. I mean, it does come with the benefit of having the Howdah, obviously, as do all of the Bastildons and all mounted Lizardmen monsters, right? So that's nice. It is a benefit to its credit here. Again, 140 armor, very good. 65 leadership's okay. 40 speed is not great. I mean, it's basically like an infantry speed monster. Has an okay charge animation, but only 34 charge bonus, 250 weapon strength. Pretty low. So you really, when it comes to the Bastildons, you got to get value. I mean, unless you're taking a feral one from their special abilities, right? And kind of talking about the three of them, Solar Engine's definitely the most competitive. I mean, in the sense that you take it in the most matchups. It's just kind of good all around both situations. Vampire counts can pretty easily tie down missile units, though, which is why I tend not to take too many, or if I do, they're typically mobile missile units. Here, specifically, you can get some weird flying shenanigans, so I don't really like taking many missile units at all. You can occasionally, Pterodon Riders, obviously Chameleon Skinks can be pretty decent as well if they don't get caught up, but Vampire Cavalry is actually pretty good in this matchup, and in most matchups, so something to be aware of. And of course, tying down with zombies, they've got that Blood Tempest thing, what I call it. But anyway, back to Bastildons. Rev Crystal is okay. I mean, healing charges, if you use all of them, is quite a bit of healing, which can be useful in and of itself, especially when you combine it with, like, let's say, other healing effects, because it actually does resurrect combatants, right? So you can use, like, Earthblood or Regrowth, for example, or Apotheosis, healing spell to, top up their models, and if you time it right, you can actually heal some of the models back with this Revification Crystal, so that's pretty nice. But, I mean, it does take a long time for you to get value from this. 60-second cooldown, it's only 600 HP on a single combatant, which really, at the end of the day, isn't a ton. The Arc of Sotek just straight up dealing damage in return, and also, obviously, has a poison effect, which is somewhat wasted, to be honest, because he already kind of has an AoE poison effect with just the missiles, but it's something. It's more about the damage, which is okay. It's definitely okay. Not impactful enough, not enough armor-piercing damage to really be impactful in those types of blobs, but still pretty decent. And then, yeah, the Solar Engine, obviously, you know all about this, or you should. Blinded effect, very good. Does great explosion missile damage. Artillery monsters, so that's awesome. Anyway, that's it for Bastildons for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like and subscribe. Big thanks again to all my patrons and Spudhouse for the session today. Had a really fun session, man, so thank you again. And we'll see you next time.